Well, here we are back in Calvin's living room, the scene of many important functions down through the years on the Ridge Road in Champlain, the virtual home of Hometown Cable, and lots of family functions have been held there through the years. And so rather than call it the Champlain Idea, today we're going to call it the Plattsburg Idea. We're here around the middle of January 2007, sitting at a table that's very familiar here. I could almost take a nap here. I've been here so many times.
In the last year, yeah.
Yeah, we've been through a great deal of Calvin's library. I was at my doctor's this morning, and he was commenting on the television show, and he said, "You guys really like history, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, we do."
Especially when it's being made.
And especially when it's being made, and you know what? We've been lucky enough to be there on the scene as history is being made. We weren't here in 1915, 16, and 17. The Plattsburg Idea was a reality on the former Plattsburg Air Force Base, but we do know a little bit about it. And with that, armed with that much information, Calvin has really, you've been involved on the internet gathering pictures and lots of things.
Yeah, it's something that I'd first heard about in doing some shows back with Bob Venn. I first heard about the Plattsburg Idea. It's not something I grew up knowing about, and you probably didn't hear about it till you moved into the area.
That's exactly right.
And apparently it was very well known, as we will see when we get going here, not only in the teens, but right up to World War II.
Oh, sure.
And I've been trying to find a little more information. Judge Penny Clute has done such a great job there, but unfortunately, I don't know about you, but I just wouldn't feel all that comfortable as someone roaming around the city of Plattsburgh to walk into the judge's office to go look at the walls. So
they don't realize actually that program that we did is in the lobby of what is now called Plattsburgh City Court. It moved from City Hall in downtown Plattsburgh to the former base, at a large building on the base, and so anybody can go in there. I don't know, you might have to go through the metal detector to get a good look at the walls. Some people might feel uncomfortable going to the lobby of City Court, but I'm sure it is a public place and it would be open to the public, and they did a fine job on gathering information. And while they were gathering information, I wasn't even aware of it until it was almost finished.
That she was doing this, yes.
And I had a wonderful Sunday New York Times edition, large bound book that I donated to the Clinton County Historical Museum after the fact, and we did a program on that too.
Right.
Those were some neat.
Yes, there's just some great pictures in there. And what I have found is that since only within the last couple of months, we did that show over a year ago, and only within the past couple of months I decided to start searching a little bit more for stuff about the Plattsburg Idea. And what I have found is there are hundreds of pictures out there that were taken, and they're available almost on a daily basis. Something from the Plattsburg Idea in that World War I era will pop up on eBay. So anybody looking to get something, you can find it. I bid whenever feasible, but what I have found is there are a lot of military collectors who collect items. There was some great stories on the motor vehicles that they had there, and people that collect motor vehicles.
Oh, sure. You're covering a lot of categories, aren't you?
So you'll get these people here that. So what I'm real happy is when I recognize somebody who buys something, and I can tell from their name that they're somebody from the area, and I know that piece of our area history here in the Tri-Counties is coming back to the North Country rather than going off to Maryland with somebody who has no ties to our region, but only wants it for the military history or so on. So it's nice when this stuff comes back to the region.
And people around, this was a project that, as you said, it was ongoing, and it was well known internationally.
Oh, yes.
There were a lot of, just based on that, the New York Times coverage of it, week after week after week, way back when, the beautiful photographs that were taken, and the large number of people that were a part of this project. And not just businessmen, but presidents and
Mayors.
generals and mayors and,
Yeah.
So we hope we can just turn the spotlight back on the Plattsburg Idea once again.
And I'm very impressed with what your computer is doing with that CD I made up of some of the pictures that I gleaned
Oh,
off.
it's just terrific. I'm very thrilled. We'll be able to show
we
these
will be
later
able
on.
to pass this along to
Sure.
the folks. Since we were here to do the look at my bookcase,
In your library.
yeah, I have continued to add things, and I actually had this one, but I didn't bring it out that day. Was the Canal State of New York Canal State. But this book kind of reinforces the idea of why Plattsburgh, why we were so accessible up here. The fact that this was a thoroughfare. I mean, you had the lake, you had the railroads. Presidents came up to Hotel Champlain to spend weeks in the
They
summer.
sure did.
Teddy Roosevelt, as we know, was in Isle of Mont and went on to the Adirondacks back when McKinley was assassinated. He got the word in Isle of Mont that he'd been shot, and when he was in the Adirondacks, when he found out that he had died, and he was left there in that stagecoach ride to become the president. At that point, he was vice president. So this region was well known, and it was an area that was accessible because there were no airplanes. If you were going to go from here to there, 300, 400 miles away, you took a boat or a train. So this area was just as easily accessible as anywhere else in the world, and why not come up here? And that's what happened because of the railroads and because of the canal system that we had. This was a very important hub.
And that goes way back in time. I'm going to mention it now, but you and I probably will be able to spend a whole program on a treatise that somebody handed me the other day at breakfast. Last Sunday morning, a lady walked up. She said, "I promised you this years ago." Something they found, I guess, in her mother-in-law's effects after the woman was deceased. It was a treatise that was written in 1964 and donated to a history teacher at the campus school. And it's quite thick, and it covers the history of transportation in Clinton County in the North Country. From the old Indian dugout canoes to stagecoaches to steamboats, naming all the steamboats. Tragically, the pictures that originally went with the treatise are not, the holes are there in the manuscript, but it's not. And I was fascinated to read it because whoever wrote this, and the name is written on it's probably a name that's familiar to people here, was very familiar with the history of the North Country and tied into the railroads with the canals and the whole 9 yards. So we'll get to look at that together sometime and talk about it.
Somebody should put up a transportation museum in the area.
That's another possibility of making a copy of that or donating the actual manuscript to the Transportation Museum. So you've got a lot of great books.
Yeah, some of this is stuff I think I got since we last talked. Here's a little booklet on the Hotel Champlain.
Oh, don't you love it?
And it shows so many great pictures of what you can
It's
see.
in great shape.
Yeah, why presidents came up here, and it's just was such a showplace at that time, which is now, of course, Clinton Community College, those of you who don't know what Hotel Champlain was. But it's just a great little booklet, but it does show you that this was a world-class destination.
Absolutely.
And
That's great.
A lot of the people who came up here as part of the Plattsburgh Idea were familiar with the area already.
Oh, I didn't know you had that one either.
Here's a book
I like that.
On the Lake Champlain Tercentennial. And again, 1909, just before this here, this is what was going on in our area. We had just finished celebrating the tercentennial of Champlain's arrival in 1609.
And guess what? Very shortly it'll be the quadricentennial.
We're taping this, as you said, in 2008, and very shortly we will be celebrating the 400th year. So this, again, highlighted this region. You had the President of France was here. You had people from all over the world that took part in that celebration. Here's a booklet I just recently picked up, and I was amazed that I was able to get it. It's a booklet put out for the Plattsburgh Centennial celebration. And again, this was 1914, ties right in with this era. The people around the nation were well aware that this region had that military history, and we're just in the process of celebrating that centennial.
This
And
is another one that's pristine.
This is
Doesn't look like anybody ever opened it before you.
it's
I've seen a copy of this before, but I think it was at the Clinton County Historical Museum.
probably is, and it's just
Oh, that's lovely.
picture after picture, the number of events that they did. Let me tell you who the commission is. The state commission that put on the Plattsburg Centennial Celebration. When it's done locally in 2014, there probably won't be a state commission, but the chairman was Francis Stetson. He was from New York City, from Broad Street in New York City. Thomas Conway from Nassau in New York City, Nassau Street, was the vice chairman. Another chairman here of the executive committee was from Broadway. And I got a fellow named Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy from Washington, D.C.
He surely was.
is the fourth guy listed on this
Isn't
here.
that neat?
And there was a Fairbanks from Shazy on the committee. There was a Vert from Plattsburgh. A Noble, Henry Noble from Essex. Emerson from Warrensburg. And basically, that was it. Most of the people on this committee were from around the state. And that shows that it wasn't just Plattsburgh, Clinton, Essex, and Franklin County that was interested in this celebration. It was something that was appreciated statewide, and I'm sure to some extent nationwide. So it
Very nice book.
it emphasizes why Plattsburgh at this particular period in time, and something that has nothing to do with it, but this is a book that we saw, and I had to get a copy of, just so that
And you did get a good
just so
copy.
Halmiro isn't the only one
How
in the
do
area.
you get these perfect copies?
Well,
Do you know that when you bid on them?
well, they're pretty well described, and this is a physician's hospital, and this is one that we looked at when we did the story with Halmiro.
And this was done in the 1920s because it was built in 1926 by Miner.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
And completely off the subject.
Oh,
was,
no, but
I found this here. Every once in a while, I'll type in my buddy Sid Couchy's name, and this publication here, Comic Book Artists, was put out, and our buddy Sid was.
there he is. Whole
in
lot
there.
of little lotta. Don't you love it?
Yeah, charming.
That's
charming
fairly
Sid Couchy.
recent then, isn't it? Huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This was done recent. Yeah. In fact, it mentions his first pitch throwing there in 2002.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Nice picture with Ruth.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope he has a copy of it.
I would think he does, and it shows his cards that he made when he became the first pitch Hall of Famer. So this is just stuff that I'm able to find
Isn't
on
that nice
eBay.
to have something like that?
You know, he's just so happy with the fact that eBay is there and that these things become available. The things you probably wouldn't even know about
You never would know.
unless
no.
unless you just stumbled across them. And the way I'm stumbling across them is on eBay. Now, here's a picture taken, Gordy, before the Plattsburg Idea was ever conceived, and this is the military barracks parade grounds with the soldiers. And it mentions that those barracks, those stone structures that we're so familiar with, were constructed from 1838 to 1842. And again, it helps reinforce this is the Clinton County Historical Calendar from 1999.
I haven't seen that since that time, 9 years ago.
But again, it emphasizes the military history that this region had. And right on up through, well, when the air base left.
Yeah.
And this here is just a little thing. I still run into people. My brother, my youngest brother, lives in Albany, and he is 12 years younger than I am, so he's 48 years old. And he was fascinated when he stumbled across something on the missile bases. He was born in '59, so he had no idea that we had these missile bases
He
up
was
here
just a
Sac,
a toddler in those days.
surrounding the Sac base. He says, "Did you people know this was going on?" Of course we knew. You know, what do you think that missile base road that
Oh,
Norm
boy.
Bono lives on was named for? But it shows the missile bases in
The
Swanton,
Atlas
Alberg,
missile bases surrounding the area.
that surrounded the Sac base at Plattsburgh. And again, Swanton, Alberg, Champlain, Moores, Ellenburg, Brainardsville, Dannemora, Redford, Riverview, Alsable Forks, Lewis, Willsboro, and then up to St. Albans. And there is a site on the internet that shows what has happened to just about every one of these.
I
And
did
you
not
take some
know that.
inside tours of some of these that have been
Oh.
fixed up. So anybody with any interest in the military, the air base, and the SAC, and this whole missile base thing, there's a great site on the internet that has pictures. It'll just blow your mind when you see it.
Great learning experience when you realize the reason those missile sites were built in 1961, another critical time in our nation's history, right?
Well, those of us who were around and alert in October of 1962 in the
boy.
Cuban Missile Crisis, we were all, we didn't have Fox News and CNN and headline news.
No, there was a lot of nail biting in those days, and
You were sitting by your radio as much as possible.
it wasn't until later that most people began to realize how close we were.
Oh,
How
well,
close we were back in those days to pulling the string on the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was nail biting for us. Imagine what it was for Kennedy and the people in Washington. Wow.
yep. And again, for those youngsters who aren't familiar with the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Soviet Union was sending missiles into Cuba, and we'd set up a blockade and said, get them out. And we were ready to go to war. And, and
That
we'd-
close. That close.
And fortunately, Khrushchev backed off, and we got rid of the Cuban missiles. And so far, we haven't been blown up. Today's program, I warned you, Gordy, you're going to be reading a lot.
Reading is good. I know how to do that.
And I've gathered quite a few pictures and several books and some information. And at the very end, we're going to honor these people. I gave you this record to copy, which again I got off eBay. And I guess I've got it pretty much taped
You got
in
it
there.
taped up pretty good, but both sides still played. When you first took a look at it, Calvin said, "Boy, it looks awful skinny. I don't know if it'll play."
It looked almost flat with the grooves.
And I went online and actually bought a fairly expensive turntable so that I could make a good copy of this and many other records that I have. A great old RCA Victor record called The Last Long Mile, the Plattsburgh Marching Song. And on the flip side, a familiar song to even young people, I think, their grandmothers must have sung what was called the stuttering song, Katie.
Yep.
You're the only girl that I adore.
I would say, you were playing records for a good number of your years. That the Katie one was the side that they played, and on the flip side was the Plattsburgh Marching Song. But it was a well-known song, and it was a song that maybe one of these days will, if he hasn't already recorded it, I should have checked with Stanley Ransom to see if he's recorded it or not.
He might have.
Yeah.
He might have. That's a treasure, and every now and again, a copy of it will appear on eBay.
Yeah, and that one there, that's where I got that one, and I'm glad it was able to play. Obviously, the person selling it wasn't sure if it was playing or not. He said, it looks good.
It looks good. It sounds great.
And that's why I got it so cheap.
It's kind of a catchy melody too.
And you will hear it right at the end. When we've done everything else, we're gonna play that Plattsburgh Marching Song. The last time we were here doing our tour of my bookcase, we did
Yes, I saw
show
that.
this poster.
I love it.
But this was the type of poster that was set up around the nation, inviting people to come here to Plattsburgh and take part in.
Are you
in
trained to
preparation.
defend your country? And we want to reiterate during the course of this program how very important this Plattsburg idea was to the future of the United States military. Training these officers and made an impact on, I'm sure, every conflict since that time, not to mention the fact that it began a program that's familiar to all of our viewers called ROTC.
And that's, you know,
Oh, there you are. That came from the show Toot Toot, in case people didn't know.
This again is how well known Plattsburg, the Plattsburg Idea, and that particular song were. This was a Broadway show. Toot Toot was the name of it, and the first song listed in here is "The Last Long Mile," and that is the Plattsburg
Subtitle,
marching
the
song.
Plattsburg marching song.
And
oh, you can open it up and sing along with it.
yeah. Now the
music by Jerome Kern.
yeah,
Not
by
too
Jerome
hard to
Kern,
take.
but I'm just wondering if he wrote the Last Long Mile. Lyrics were by Burton Braley, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But Jerome Kern, obviously a very well-known name on Broadway, and
Oh boy.
the Toot Toot and the Plattsburg marching song.
Oh, I had forgotten you
A
had a
musical
copy of
comedy.
it. You devil you. That's great.
And it's also listed in this large book here of Legionnaires of all military songs. And again, the Plattsburg marching song is listed in there. So anybody who's got a musical instrument that wants to
There it is. No kidding. I
wants
didn't
to know how to play it, I will lend them a copy of this so they can learn how to play the Plattsburg
Copyright
marching songs.
1917. If you remember your Roman numerals, cool.
And of course, it has words, not just music. Words
Oh.
and music. So stay tuned to the end. Now in 10 minutes from now or so, you're going to have a chance to hear it.
I wonder if anybody ever TiVos this program, huh?
I'm sure it's
I'm sure some people
Let's
record
see.
it for later viewing.
okay. My big problem with trying to get this show done, Gordy, was working on a very little knowledge of World War One, which I think most of us would have to plead guilty to, and trying to decipher which of the tons of material I was able to come up with to put in which order. The person who was generally credited for being the genius behind all this is this general here, General Leonard Wood.
Exactly.
And through his leadership, as you were starting to say there momentarily ago, the U.S. was prepared, and we were able to get involved in World War One. Not that we were looking to; we were trying to avoid every way we could to not get involved. But when we did get involved, we were prepared, and we had the officers trained and ready to lead the men. Because you can't suddenly say, "Here, we got a military. Let's."
Oh,
This
boy.
isn't the Revolutionary War where
Absolutely.
you call in the militia. This was modern warfare, and this was our first modern war, I think we'd have to call it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Here is Teddy Roosevelt, who was the person who gave Wood the power to do what he has done. And Teddy Roosevelt was very much a part of this project.
He
as
showed
we
up
will
here
see.
several times, yes.
And here is Wood and Roosevelt, and here is Roosevelt and Wood at Plattsburg.
Isn't that great?
And Teddy Roosevelt was very much a part of this program and used his influence to make sure that this all happened. And without the U.S. involvement, without the U.S.'s successful involvement in this war, who knows how different the world would be right now.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
again, we have to credit a lot of the U.S. success to what happened here, right in our backyard at Plattsburg.
I should have brought some of the leg windings that I had from World War One. I told you about it, those khaki leg windings
Yeah.
that look like an old-fashioned ace bandage is what they look like. You see them
They're
see them in the photographs.
Yeah, they're high-legged uniforms.
Yeah.
The Plattsburg Idea, as we know it, kind of evolved in the very early teens and up through 1917 when we became involved with the World War One. And of course, it wasn't known as World War One until World War Two came along. But at that time, it was the Great War. And
The Great War is right.
the war to end all wars, I guess.
And that was, boy, amazing, huh? when you have the retrospect of almost 100 years to look back.
Well, here's a. It's too light, unfortunately, for the showing on the screen. But here's what the European map looked like at the time.
Oh yeah.
And you'll see Poland enlisted as part of Russia, along with the Ukraine and so on. And you don't see a Czechoslovakia. You see Germany. You see Austria, Hungary. So there's no Austria. There was no Hungary. There was no Yugoslavia. But this is what it looked like.
A lot of changes before, during, and after. Now you don't
Right.
see Czechoslovakia anymore.
Again, yeah. You don't see Yugoslavia anymore. You know, it's come and gone.
Yep.
But I was able to get a timeline off the internet, and obviously Encyclopedia would have done the same thing. But it's so much easier not to have to dig out one volume
Absolutely,
after another
right.
just to go on that internet. And it said that this explosion that turned out to be World War One is something that had been brewing for decades and years. And as we all know from our history books, it was sparked by the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. Ferdinand's death was at the hands of a Serbian, and it wasn't Serbia, it was just some Serbian nationalist secret society that wanted this guy assassinated. But what it did was it gave excuses. We all see
We see those today, don't we, huh?
excuses. Oh, okay, now we have a reason to
Sure.
do what we've been trying to do here. So this gave an excuse. So Austria-Hungary's reaction to the death of their heir, who was not greatly beloved by their emperor, according to this here to begin with, was issuing of an ultimatum to Serbia, and that demand that the assassins be brought to justice, but not to Serbian justice. Austria-Hungary was going to mete out the justice. So they kind of bullied their way right through Serbia. Now, Austria-Hungary's expectation was that Serbia would reject the severe terms of the ultimatum, thereby giving her a pretext for launching a limited war against Serbia. So, like recent times when we thought we would go to Iraq and get it over with in a hurry, Austria-Hungary thought they could go into Serbia and just march in and take over. However, Serbia had some Slavic ties with Russia. And although Russia would not be drawn into dispute to any great extent, other than maybe a few words of diplomatic protest, the Austria-Hungarian government sought assurances from its ally, Germany, that Germany would come to Austria-Hungary's aid in the unlikely event that Russia declared war on Austria-Hungary. Now, on the internet, there is a great site that shows the telegrams back and forth from the Tsar in Russia to the leader in Germany, and these guys were distant cousins.
Come on.
But you can see the
No kidding.
veiled threats covered with roses, and Germany was going to go ahead and attack no matter what. And I think Russia was the one that really didn't want to see a war happen, but they had the ties with Serbia and felt obliged to do it. But go on the website, and there's great back and forth, and it gives you a great insight into actually what was taking place at that time. So Germany readily agreed, and apparently even encouraged Austria-Hungary's warlike stance. So, the Archduke was assassinated on June 28th, 1914. On July 28th, unsatisfied by Serbia's response, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia, bound to Serbia by treaty, announced mobilization of its vast army in her defense, a slow process that would take around 6 weeks to complete. Well, it took 6 weeks to complete, but from July 28th to the 1st of August, which is only a few days, Germany, allied to Austria-Hungary by treaty, viewed the Russian mobilization as an act of war against Austria-Hungary, and after scant warning declared war on Russia. So from July 28th to August 1st, instead of Austria-Hungary going after Serbia, now Russia and Germany were at war. France, bound by a treaty to Russia, found itself at war against Germany, and by extension on Austria-Hungary. This was declared on August 3rd. Germany was swift in then invading neutral Belgium so as to reach Paris by the shortest possible route. And of course, as we know very well from talking with Hector Kaufman, who was bailed out over Belgium, Belgium was very much in the middle of that war again 25 years later during World War II. Britain, allied to France by a more loosely worded treaty, which placed a moral obligation upon her to defend France, declared war against Germany on August 4th. Her reason for entering the conflict lay in another direction. She was obligated to defend neutral Belgium by terms of a 75-year-old treaty. With Germany's invasion of Belgium on August 4th and the Belgian king's appeal to Britain for assistance, Britain committed herself to Belgium's defense. Later that day, like France, she was, by extension, also at war with Austria-Hungary because she was at war with Germany. With Britain's entry into the war, her colonies and dominions abroad variously offered military and financial assistance. These included Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, and South Africa. However, the United States, under President Woodrow Wilson, declared the U.S. absolutely neutral, an official stance that would last until 1917, when Germany's policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, which seriously threatened America's commercial shipping, forced the U.S. to finally enter the war on April 6, 1917. Japan, honoring a military agreement with Britain, declared war on Germany on August 23, 1914. So take out that U.S. in 1917 and you go from August 4th to August 23rd. Right. Japan got involved. Italy, although allied to both Germany and Austria-Hungary, was able to avoid entering the fray by citing a clause enabling it to evade its obligations to both. Its treaty apparently said that if they were invaded, if they were attacked, Italy would come to their aid. But they weren't attacked, they were the attackers. So Italy said, nope. And then the following year, in May 1915, she joined the conflict by siding with the Allies against her two former allies. Now, the United States, so this was going on, 1914, 1915, 1916, all that time, this great war was going on, and the U.S. wasn't involved in it yet.
Exactly, yeah, I remember seeing all those pictures in that New York Times. They were all progressive.
Yeah.
It came right up to our involvement and the Plattsburg Idea.
And the military, particularly the military people, but the people on the street, the business people, obviously their whole way of life was being affected because they're shipping stuff over there and it's getting blown up. The ships are being attacked. They know that as much as we want to avoid this, unless that war comes to an end, we're eventually going to be drawn into it. And the last thing you want to do is get into a war and be unprepared. So 1914, 1915, 1916, they are trying to mobilize the college students, but also the business people, the business leaders, because they figure the business leaders are the ones who are going to be drawn into this, and they're going to be the leaders on the battlefield also. So the United States declared war on Germany on April 6, 1917. Although the reasons were varied and complex, the one having the greatest emotional impact upon the average American was Germany's introduction of unrestricted submarine warfare following the sinking of the Lusitania But that happened back in 1915,
Yeah.
May 7th, 1915.
Another
So,
very famous event.
but it still took us 2 years.
Yep.
In 1916, Woodrow Wilson was elected president for a second term, largely because of the slogan, "He kept us out of war." So the Lusitania was sunk in 1915. Wilson said, "I'm going to keep us out of war," and he was reelected in 1916. It showed very much that this country did not want to get involved in that war. In January 16th of 1917, Germany dispatched the Zimmermann telegram to Heinrich von Eckart, the German ambassador to Mexico, instructing him to inform the Mexican government that Germany was willing to give the American Southwest back to Mexico if they declared war on the United States. Now, this was something that I was totally
I'm
unaware of
until this very moment. I was not aware of that.
So I knew that Arizona and New Mexico were the last couple admitted into the Union, the
Yeah.
47th and 48th states, until, because you and I were very much alert when Hawaii and Alaska before that became our 49th and 50th states. But New Mexico became a state, the 47th state, in 1912. Arizona became our 48th state in 1912. New Mexico in January of 1912, Arizona in February of 1912. Again, we're just in this timeline. Both of those had been part of Mexico before the Mexican War, which took place 1846 to 1848. The Mexican War occurred after Texas statehood in 1845. Texas became a state. Mexico said, we want Texas. That's why we defeated you at the Alamo in 1836.
Yeah, way back when. Yep.
But you look back, 1846, 1848 Mexican War, New Mexico, Arizona, 1912. Right now we're in an era that's about 100 years past that. So we can look back and say, all right, let's put the whole clock back. Let's make this 1908 instead of 2008. 1946, 1948 don't seem that long ago, do they?
Yeah, isn't it amazing?
So this
Sure.
Mexican War, which took place, 60 years before, wasn't that far away. The people, the leaders, were still very much aware of that. So
Sure.
So when Germany said to Mexico, "You help us out, and
Isn't that amazing?
we'll give you the..."
I'll bet you 99% of the people viewing this program are just as alarmed at that as I was just now when you read that. I did a double take.
And it's hitting home right now, Gordy, because we've got this illegal
Oh, yeah.
immigrant problem.
Oh, sure.
And one of the things we keep hearing along the way, not out front, but here on the periphery, is there are people in Mexico who still have not conceded that that southern part of our country belongs here.
Sure.
They want it back from Mexico. So they're still looking at Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and California, and they want it back.
Those things, like the Civil War in the United States, and like our what we did in Hawaii, for example, in the 1800s, there are lots of people 100 years later who are, those wounds are still wide open for them, and there are lots of people who keep those things festering through the years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's not that big a surprise, and I'm glad you use the perspective of history, because I often think of, my attitude now and my attitude when I was a teenager and the Korean War was going on. You say, geez, that wasn't long ago.
Mhm.
And you say the Second World War, heck,
Yeah.
I was around and old enough to understand what Gabriel Heater was talking about on the radio, so it makes perfect sense. You've done your homework.
And a German cryptographer, a British cryptographer, is the one who was able to translate that telegram to Mexico. But
It was intercepted, right, by
Yeah.
the British, yeah.
yeah, so I don't think I think it says here that they're not sure if Mexico ever even got the that information until after the war. But you think of Teddy Roosevelt. What do we think of? San Juan Hill
Yeah.
and Cuba. Conflicts with that part of the Western Hemisphere were still going on. I mean,
sure.
this Spanish-American War. I mean,
Absolutely.
this,
Still fresh.
yeah.
From late 1890s, sure.
Yeah. So all this stuff was very much a part of what people were thinking then, and they knew there was a serious problem. Should we wait? You don't want to wait till Mexico has these German allies before whether they would have sided with Germany or not, we never know, fortunately, because it didn't ever come to that point. So they started running camps in the area, and not just here, but in other places as well. Here's something that the American Review of Reviews from September of 1915. Now there's a whole article in here on the Plattsburg Idea, but in the earlier part of this it says an account of the citizens training camp at Plattsburg, New York appears elsewhere in this review. Some 1,200 men, remarkable for intelligence and character, have been given a month for intense technical military instruction because they believe that in so doing they are setting a good example and fulfilling a duty to the country that they love. Again, this is 1915, a year after the war had just begun over there in Europe. So this newspaper here, or booklet, actually was very much chronicles the whole involvement here in that 1915 era. And here's the Plattsburg response on page 301. And it's I think a 6-page, 7-page article. Lots of pictures.
Lots of wonderful
That
photographs.
we will get into. I'm going to stop the tape at this moment. You and I are going to look at this and decide which parts that you're going to read. And we're going to read some of this here. This was, again, written in 1915, in September, and it talks about the summer of 1915.
Okay. I could fully understand how many of our viewers would take a different point of view in wanting to watch this program and listen to every word from beginning to end. You can't be interested in living in America, never mind living in Clinton County or the North Country, without being interested in what happened leading up to the First World War. Pivotal points in the United States history, especially as we're recording this in an election year in the middle of January 2008. If you like pictures of horses and old tanks and cars and trucks and generals with handlebar mustaches, you'll like that point of view. If you're a student, a real bona fide student of history, you'll be excited about it all over again, and maybe we'll issue some kind of a bogus degree in history when we finish the show today. Calvin talked about the American Review of Reviews, edited by Albert Shaw, that comes from September 1915. Mind you, this is a couple of years before our involvement and the Plattsburg Idea. And I'd like to read a little bit in the Plattsburg response part that we pointed out to you a few minutes ago. And this is called A Citizens' Movement Toward Military Preparedness, written by a gentleman whose name is William Menkel. And I'll skip through sections of it that I think would be interesting for you. It starts out, Plattsburg in northern New York is picturesquely situated on the western shore of Lake Champlain. Besides being a United States customs port and a thriving manufacturing community, it's an attractive summer resort and has interesting military and historical associations. Here is located an army post with barracks that are among the largest in the United States. Off Valcour Island nearby on October 11, 1776, the English and American fleets, commanded respectively by Benedict Arnold and Sir Guy Carleton, fought for the first naval battle ever occurring between Great Britain and the United States. During the War of 1812, Plattsburg was the headquarters of the American forces on the northern frontier. The famous Battle of Lake Champlain, in which Commodore MacDonough defeated a British fleet, took place in Plattsburg Bay. And in a land action in the vicinity, General Macomb repulsed a superior British force. But last month, Plattsburg received more attention from the country at large than ever before in its history. This is owing to the fact that there was conducted here a military school more unique than any ever held on American soil or anywhere else for that matter. Nearly 1,200 men, that's enough to form 8 full companies at war strength, gathered here on August 10th for a 4-week course in military instruction. This alone did not make the encampment significant. It was the type of the men, the work they accomplished, the spirit of it all that gave the enterprise its remarkable character. These men were not graduated as officers from the brief schooling. It was not intended that they should be. The 4 weeks intensive course covered the work that occupies 5 or 6 months in the usual training of soldiers, and that gives men a good grounding in military education. And I'll skip forward to the section called Why This Camp? The thing grew from a very small beginning. A few men, becoming interested in our lack of preparation, were eager to secure some military instruction. General Wood, whose name we've mentioned over and over again, gladly consented to help them, making the provision that they should gather a company of at least 75 or 100. He doubtless had been gratified if no more than this number had ever turned out. After the movement had started, though, enthusiasm grew rapidly. And when the time came to start for Plattsburg, over 1,000 applications for enrollment had been received. These men didn't leave their affairs to attend the camp for pleasure or for the novelty of the thing. Probably any of them would have chosen other methods for more of this plan, but their apparatus had all been provided in advance and was ready for the call. Some of the men already had their outings. Others gave up vacations to enlist in this camp. To all of them it meant the giving up of a 1/12 of a year's time. And what was the meaning of it all? Why did they do this thing? To fit themselves for service to their country in time of need. To make of themselves efficient units in a system of national defense. One eminent member of the camp, who had brought 2 sons with him, said he was there as a personal protest against our condition of unpreparedness. The men generally felt the same way. They were convinced of the necessity of putting the country in a better state of preparation for defense, and were willing to contribute their share of personal service promptly toward that end. They weren't the kind who were ignorant of conditions either here or abroad. Intelligent and efficient, they were men who were used to going at a problem in a direct way to achieve maximum results with a minimum expenditure of time. They saw a problem and they applied themselves personally, promptly, and practically to its solution. The camp, in its spirit and methods, furnished a lesson in efficiency for the development of our nation's program of defense. It's now fairly well known that the need of the country is not only for a larger navy and a larger mobile army, but for more reserves, more equipment of all kinds, and for the systematizing of our transportation and supply forces. We need a system of military training that will give us a sufficiently large body of reserve and will provide for the raising of volunteers when the actual need arises. So the plan appeared and prepared by the General Staff in 1912 and approved by the Secretary of War calls for a force of 500,000 men, regulars and state militia, and in addition for the raising of 300,000 volunteers, Once such a plan is provided, the volunteers can be raised at need, and they'll be forthcoming when the call is issued. General Wood is assured of this, and has only the highest praise for the loyalty of the American volunteer, in spite of a false impression to the contrary. It is not the volunteer or the volunteer spirit that General Wood decries. The thing condemned is the volunteer system that leaves everything to be done at the last moment. The idea that when the fire's already broken out, there's time enough to organize your brigade, skirmish about the hut for hose, commandeer a cart, seek your water connections, try to put your fire out. Even our volunteer fire departments don't work on that kind of a plan. Their apparatus has all been provided in advance as ready for the call. So that's what it was all about here. And it goes on to say, this, therefore, the providing of officers for the training of men, is the great purpose of such institutions as the Plattsburg camp of last month. To officer properly the 1.25 million volunteers that would probably be called for in case of a sudden need, and modern war is sudden, with the aggressor well prepared, would require some 40,000 officers. The sources of supply for such officers are now limited. Retired military men who are still young enough to serve will furnish some, though not many. Those who have qualified through examinations and whose names are listed by the War Department from another source, also limited. The military schools of high standing can supply a number. Then there are the agricultural and mechanical colleges, which under the Morrill Land Grant Act of 1862 receive government aid on condition that they provide military courses. But the military instruction in these institutions is variable in amount and quality. It needs to be standardized. When this is done, a large number of its officers may be obtained from them. All these sources, properly regulated by the government, under control of the War Department, will assure a regular annual supply of volunteer officers. That's what it's all about. And the last paragraph states, this highly successful Plattsburg experiment, and it was an experiment, the first camp of its kind in the country, was held under the auspices of the Eastern Department of the United States Army. It is gratifying to note that the Western Department has planned similar camps for the coast to open about the first of this month at the Presidio at San Francisco. So it all started right here.
It started here and it continued here, and I just can't emphasize enough that World War I, as we came to know it, was the first modern war. Because again, if you look back, put ourselves, as we're taping this in 2008, put us back in 1908, because it's easier to do 100 than it is to do 93 or 95 or whatever. And think back that in 1880s, we're still fighting the Indian Wars. We're fighting, Custer's Last Stand took place. So looking back now to the 1980s, from our perspective, isn't too far back.
Not really.
And Teddy Roosevelt charging up San Juan Hill with a sword in his hand, and we've seen the things at the Remington Museum. This was all cavalry and so on. This whole idea of this modern warfare was something brand new, and you couldn't go out there and fight Germany and Austria and Hungary and fight them as if you were going up against the Indians at Custer's Last Stand there, Little Bighorn. I mean, we had to do this in a way that was made sense and was
and the mechanization of the war. We had to develop viable submarines that would cross an ocean and come back. We had to build tanks. The pictures of those early Sherman tanks and the other tanks that succeeded them, and the embryonic airplane, which played a big factor in World War I. And it was only
1903.
It was only a few years old at that time.
1903, Kitty Hawk.
So this country got, as it does for every war, really had to crank up and get ready. But that time especially because of the mechanization of the war.
Yeah, we're moving into this modern era, and we were trying as hard as we could to avoid becoming involved in this conflict. But again, that took place in 1915. The war began in Europe in 1914. So this was only a year after. Then in 1916, here's a newspaper that I was able to pick up recently. It's called The Whistle, and it proudly exclaims that it's the world's most expensive newspaper.
50 cents.
50 cents.
Four
This is
pages.
volume 1, number 1. 4 pages, printed in 1916. You can imagine what that would be in today's dollars if you were going to buy this newspaper. But it was printed, and the people buying this were these well-to-do folks who were at the camp. As we get into the 1917 era, I've got some yearbooks that will show a lot of the personnel here who were there that particular year. But this shows the one company roster here, Gordy, that is quite long. That's only Company L.
And that's the company that produced this newspaper.
This is their newspaper. But one of the articles in here, the lead article on the left hand, is the Plattsburg training camp idea. So I'm going to call on Gordy to read that line down there. It's probably going to be redundant. We've also got to have some information put out in 1917 by General Wood. It may be redundant, may hear some things we've already heard, but this is different writers, different perspective, and this is from 1916. What we just heard was from 1915.
Okay. It might be a little difficult at the fold because some of the words are obliterated, but I will do my best. It's a good thing I got the bifocals on today. They printed things really tiny back in those
People
days.
must have had great eyes
I think
back
they
then.
must have. When General Wood conceived the idea of a training camp for business and professional men at Plattsburg, it was frankly an experiment along the lines of a democratic military reserve. Its success depended on the character and ability of the men who enrolled, and their willingness to accept the arduous work planned for the period of training. Within 3 months, the Plattsburg Idea had taken a firm hold on the country, and the future development of the training camp movement is assured of the support of all good citizens who generally believe in the adequate preparation for any emergency that might arise, whereby the United States would need to call from private life men who could quickly take command of untrained recruits. Every man who's followed the course of work at the camp as a rookie has been impressed with it comprehensively, the wonderful scene of the training, the popular idea that most of the time is spent in disciplinary drill was quickly changed, and it's become clear to all that a serious attempt is being made to give in 30 days not only the routine of military life, quick views of all branches of Army work. The infantry instruction has been given the most prominence, naturally, but artillery, cavalry, signal corps, rifle range, hospital service have all been covered in a broad way through the selective and elective courses and special lectures. One of the striking features has to do with the military subjects. Every man who has come to the camp prepared according to instructions has acquired the basis of a library on the work of the Army that will enable him to become proficient in the essential requirements of the service. The work done at Plattsburg will be followed by a course of reading which can be intelligently understood and the purpose of much of the routine appreciated. Another good result of the Plattsburg Idea will be the spreading of enthusiasm for military training. Every man returning will be an object lesson to all of his friends as to the benefits to be derived from the physical exercises, and many will continue them long after the routine work is forgotten. The hardships of Army service will create a respect for the officers and men in the Army and show the folly of impressing untrained citizens into the military services without adequate physical training. A Republican form of government with its equal privileges for all is predicated on the principle of equal duties. The most important of these obligations is that of national defense. We've been hearing that in our political campaign in 2008.
You know, times change, but they stay the same,
Doesn't
don't they?
it? The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's an old phrase that's not trite anymore.
No.
And you and I have the benefit, at least I have the benefit of almost old age. And so I can put these things into perspective that young people perhaps can't do. I want to go on. Our heritage, which has been passed down to the present generation, was won largely on the battlefield. And the triumphs of peace are only made possible through the adequacy of our Army and Navy to prevent attack or by their power to forestall hostile action. The United States owes its prominence in the world affairs to the heroic action of our forefathers in fighting when necessary for the principles on which our form of government is founded. Every man at the camp has learned the potential horrors of the modern battlefield, and not one will go to his home without the strongest feelings as to the blessings of peace and the agonies of war. But with the record of the last year in mind, no thinking person will feel that our interests are safe unless we have a trained reserve to call on in case over the large body of trained troops are required to meet instantly any aggression. The men who are making the sacrifices necessary to attend Plattsburg camp are in the most practical form preparing themselves for the duties of their citizenship. The so-called military spirit, which is so often misconstrued into a love of war for its heroic opportunities, is entirely absent from the life of this camp. Excuse me. The underlying motive of the Plattsburg movement was clearly expressed by General Wood when he said that a little well-timed offensive is often the most certain means to success in military action. Wow.
Ounce of prevention.
You got it.
And that was from 1916. Again, it shows that there were, fortunately for our nation and for the world, because I really doubt if the Allies would have prevailed without the U.S. involvement, just like in World War II without
No
the U.S.
question.
That these people knew enough to get us prepared. And the vast majority of the public, Wilson's 1916 motto was, he kept us out of war. The vast majority of the public probably wanted to hear nothing about this war, because who wants to send themselves, their sons, their spouses out to Europe to die? It's so the whole idea was so inconceivable, but fortunately for us, there were some people who could understand that without this training, without this here, we would probably have been overrun by Germany, and how the world would have been so much different, we will never know, fortunately. Pictures we have shown through Gordy's readings and probably throughout a lot of what we've been doing so far have come from a couple of sources. I have managed to purchase a few postcards here and there, and pictures. I've gleaned some on this DVD, CD that we have in Gordy's laptop here. And there are two books, actually the same book, I have two copies of it, from 1917, from almost like yearbooks that they put out.
Mm-hmm.
This is for the whole camp. That newspaper was from one camp, one company. This here is from the whole camp. And a lot of the pictures you're seeing are going to be from this book. There's a whole bunch of ads in there. You may have seen some ads already, and you're going to definitely see some more. I found this so interesting when I first got a copy of this book, Gordy, because I'm sure, like you, I've always gotten a kick out of the old Mutt and Jeff stories. And Bud Fisher, who was the creator and man who drew Mutt and Jeff cartoon, was at Plattsburgh in 1917, and he contributed a lot of drawings to this publication.
They're beautiful. I hadn't seen some of these before.
Here's a poem written, and it's an extensive poem, written by William Roger Burlingame. I'll just read the first 4 lines. It says, "Somewhere south of dreamy Plattsburgh, there's a town that's long and low. 1,000-windowed, windswept barracks where the soldiers come and go." Now, what he was talking about was he was talking about south of Plattsburgh. He wasn't talking about Peru. I think he was talking about the army camp.
Yeah.
Where the rookies green and unbroken learn by mystic sign and token. Tongues of war as they are spoken. Learns to live and learns to grow. But he wrote this whole great, and this is, they've got the Plattsburgh marching song in here, and they've got other songs that, some of which might have been written while here in Plattsburgh. Give Me a Kiss by the Numbers by J.F. Traunstein. This is on page 58 and 59.
Wow.
There are some very creative and talented people who were here. And again, it was the leaders of the community, and somebody like Bud Fisher, who was an artist. He wasn't exempt. He was here, and these were all volunteers. This wasn't people being called up to come here. These are people that were convinced, along with General Wood and Teddy Roosevelt, and the 1917 camp was run by Colonel Paul Wolfe. So they were convinced by their cohorts, and what they did was, I think they asked each of the people. They'd go to New York City and meet with the leaders, and say, "All right, now you find people within your sphere and convince them to get involved in this," and that's exactly what they did. Regular Army officers at Plattsburgh. I highlighted this here, so I'll read what it says. It says, "If one thing more than another is true about the Plattsburgh idea, it is that it has been initiated, developed, and carried through, often over heartbreaking delays and difficulty, by men in the service of the regular Army of the United States." So the ones who ran the camp were regular military people. The ones who attended were the people on the street. "This is not to deprecate in the slightest degree the enthusiasm and patriotic service of the volunteers from civil life and from the National Guard that created and made nationwide the big idea of the Military Training Camps Association and other kindred bodies. But the determination of General Wood and his brother officers, who first made Plattsburgh a movement and a fighting cause in the half-awakened America before the war, provided the great push that made the idea an actuality." And this was written in 1917, and that was the year that we became involved in the war.
I love it. They've got aerial views taken from planes.
The aeronautics
at Plattsburgh. Isn't that amazing? There's a view of the parade grounds, maybe the first ever photograph taken from the air of that.
And there's trenches.
Base oval.
There's trenches. They dug trenches all over the city of Plattsburgh, and you can see from this
sure.
map here. Here's something I highlighted, Geordie. It's several paragraphs, so maybe I could call on you. It's Plattsburgh Ideals and Achievements. And again, this is from 1917.
All right, let me read this. It's from the Plattsburgher, the book that we've been talking about. "The historian of the future, who undertakes accurately and adequately to set forth the achievements of the Army of the United States in the World War, must give to Plattsburgh an important and unique place in its compilation. Today the world pronounces Plattsburgh, as a training camp for officers, a success. It is the American Aldershot, the American Newley. Overseas men at Plattsburgh mold are doing their full share of the work that's soon to be crowned by the spectacle of the Stars and Stripes cleaving the battle winds of Europe In other training camps, they're helping to make still more officers. In the great cantonments, they are bent upon the magic task of transforming the drafted mass into able men of arms. 4 years ago, Major General Leonard Wood planted the seed of a national military institution. Seriously conceived with prophetic foresight, still the first Plattsburgh camp was a genteel and gentle experiment. A summer pastime designed to give the college men a taste of Army life. The War Department became mildly interested in the project and, in the words of the department, endeavored to select posts, quote, located in a region in each section offering advantages desirable from the summer outing standpoint, end of quotes. At the close of these first camps, President Wilson remarked that they would be enormously beneficial to the United States because of the physical upbuilding and habits of discipline that would accrue to the attendants. Former President Taft agreed that the Plattsburgh training would be a splendid preparation for men to enter the militia in their various states. Surely the Plattsburgh seed was taking root. The next step was the organization of the Association of National Reserve Corps of the United States. The body was composed mainly of college presidents who opened recruiting stations and urged their students to enlist, ROTC. August 1914 saw a maddened Europe in death grips. The cry of preparedness went up in America. It was a loud, insistent cry, but little heeded. The possibility of the United States becoming embroiled in the conflict was so remote as to be almost observed! Exclamation point. Whatever their views on the war, however, the regular Army officers who were responsible for Plattsburgh in the beginning now quietly developed a complete system of training camps with courses of more intensified instruction. Soldiering at Plattsburgh became a strenuous form of recreation in 1915. A year later, the United States had been drawn immeasurably nearer the brink of the European cataclysm. We were still at peace with a warring world, but an emergency might come. Now, preparation became more definite, a reality.
Yes. By
Wow.
1917, it was unfortunately a reality. Next, at this point, we're going to probably the last thing we'll read will be this 6-page article written by Major General Leonard Wood in 1917. So again, it's just as the U.S. was getting involved in the World War, the Great War. But let's look at this this slideshow that we've got on your computer right now, and I'll be shooting this. Here's Captain Dory delivering a lecture at Plattsburgh military training camps.
And some of these are colorized, you know.
Yeah.
Somebody did some fancy tinting, and they look pretty decent.
There's another one from the
The
shows
parade grounds, very familiar. The buildings, very familiar to people today.
The Oval, yeah, that's the Oval.
We call it the Old Base Oval, formerly known as the parade grounds.
And here's the cavalry charge. This was 1939. So
Wow.
this was as I said earlier,
We had maneuvers here later.
this continued. It wasn't just a one-shot thing. Here's a 1939 again, putting down a smoke screen. This was before the air base, folks. This was 1939. This
Oh,
was
sure.
the Army war maneuvers.
Many people alive who remember these.
There's a truck column in 1939. Just the Plattsburg Idea didn't go away. Unfortunately, it continued through. Here's the barracks.
Guardhouse, the mess hall.
It continued right up to World War II.
And then became a college for those guys who came back.
There's
a training camp.
and there's you can see that's the World War I era. It's been colorized. The old tents.
Oh boy.
There's 1917, and these barracks were built during that era. Those wooden barracks are gone now. You can see the brick buildings behind.
Behind there, yeah. Soldiers out in the field.
Not sure what they're wearing. They look like they're Knights of Columbus.
I don't know what they've got around their necks.
I have no idea. And
Bayonet charge. The training, yeah, I've seen that photograph before. Wow. And these maneuvers went all along the Saranac River, too. There's
Yeah.
a bird's eye view of the military training camp.
and all those large tents set up.
And Lake Champlain in the distance. You
Yeah.
have a copy of this.
I-
Enrollment blank, 1916. Military training camps, U.S. Army.
Yep, this is what you signed to join. Here's a
Yeah.
street scene, it says, in the Citizens Military Training Camp.
Gee, it looks almost like Macomb Park, doesn't it? And by the way, there were maneuvers right near Macomb
All
Park in the
through.
1930s and 40s. Here's a little bit of the cavalry. Horses still a very big part of World War One.
I have no idea if here's some more cavalry training. I don't know. I have no idea.
There's an H on the Plattsburg for some reason on this picture.
If you're searching for the Plattsburg Idea, the best thing to do is search without the H on Plattsburg. But there are definitely some that had the H. Here's the
Officers
familiar
Road.
site.
Boy, you can drive down that paved version of that road right today.
This was a 1907 picture that showed why this spot was ready to go. This was an active barracks, and it was being utilized. This was taken in 1907, 1905 era.
Yeah.
Here's 1917.
Troops on drill, huh?
You see the row of houses there in the oval,
Oh,
around the
sure.
oval. There's General Wood and Major Mitchell. Looks like they've been down to Peru and stole some apples.
Do you think so, huh? The old cars.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
This was something. This was a bunch of people training with broomsticks. This was in that 1917 era, and it was the only photo in there, so I didn't buy the publication. It was in one of the Leslie's Weeklies or Harper's Weeklies. Here they are marching by the Catholic summer school.
Yeah, the girls'
With
school,
Hayden.
summer school.
Here's the Joan of Plattsburg. This is a movie that was made. This was how popular this whole thing was. They made a movie called Joan of Plattsburg.
No kidding.
Starred Mabel Normand.
Wow.
And here's a large group of folks out there. It looks like they're just in the early going of preparing their camp. Some pup tents, student shelter tents at Plattsburg. This would probably be more from the ROTC type of era.
I would guess.
And up above there, that shows how
Almost
rough.
looks like a steam tractor or something, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, in the background there, yeah.
Oh,
Mess.
that Plattsburger has a lot to do with mess, and Bud Fisher had a lot to say about it too in his pictures.
And here's by one of the rivers. This had to be out on maneuvers somewhere.
Yeah, no doubt the Saranac
Camped in the Adirondack Mountains.
on a side hill, no less.
Businessman's Camp, 1915. And this one here, somebody pointed out his tents. That's a one-of-a-kind picture right there.
My tent. Wow.
And this, Plattsburg also gave birth to naval training. And right now I'm bidding on this book. Whether I'll end up buying it or not, it depends on who else decides to bid on it. But Plattsburg also got into naval
Oh,
training.
wow.
And here again, old trucks, old vehicles. These tents are ready to pop here.
E Street. Yep.
They got their guns.
Cleaning the guns. Got the cots set up.
And these are all successful business people. Here's students training, cleaning their guns. Again,
Soldiers have to learn that even today, don't they, huh?
Yeah. There's Teddy.
Seen that picture before. Yep.
Outside of General Wood, without Teddy's influence, maybe Wood wouldn't have had the wherewithal to get this done. But Teddy Roosevelt had a lot to do with the success of the Plattsburg Idea. Here's 1917 on the rifle range. And
Behind the targets, huh?
Yeah.
Don't fire now.
I think of the Gomer Pyle so many
Yeah.
times when I see that kind of picture. Gomer Pyle episode.
My.
This was serious business, though. And there's again the view of the lake and the tents.
Boy, that's a great shot, too. I'm sure many of our viewers have never seen these.
Here's
There's
arriving.
students arriving, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that picture.
arriving by train.
That's the train station is there, and that's, I think, the old Fouquet house across the street. What part of it still exists?
Again, 1917. Lecture on military tactics. I imagine the biggest buyer of these postcards back then were the students themselves.
Probably, sure.
the campers.
Calisthenics going on, and
And up above you see them marching, and it looks like downtown Plattsburgh. And this is a nice little variety of pictures here.
oh, this is great. Washing up, huh?
1917, yeah.
Oh, my.
The cars
The
seen
bare
nowadays.
feet.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Another picture, a little different angle of the students arriving.
Sure.
Again, 1939.
Armored Cavalry Regiment, the 13th. Look
Yeah.
at the tanks.
Now, I had no idea this type of stuff went on up here before World War II. I had
Sure.
no idea this continued.
Isn't that great?
Here's back to that other era, the KP.
Well, I've seen this picture before. The guys look real thrilled to be there with their paring knives, huh?
There's another one from 1939. Now, I just was completely unaware that this type of thing continued.
Oh, you didn't know that. Thank goodness I've known so many people who were actually involved in it in the 30s.
Yeah,
Local farmers helping to feed these people, and look at this.
it's a kind of a grainy one, but you can definitely tell it's World War I era.
Oh, sure.
The helmets, the hats. Another shot of that previous one we saw, I think. The other one was a better view of the tents by the lake.
On the lakeshore.
Again, from 1917, bayonet drilling. This is another book that I've got a bid on. This was
End of the perfect day, huh? Look at this.
another yearbook type of publication.
I love it.
Another group shot with all those tents. Captain Dory delivering a lecture. Again, the parade grounds.
That's the old flagpole. The butt of that flagpole is still there.
Yeah.
It's a great story about how it was made.
And this wasn't the Wild West. This is
It's a cavalry, huh?
and again, that's 1939. I think we've already gone through this part here with the aeronautics training, war maneuvers. So, we will continue. We're down to probably less than 10 minutes left on this tape. So
Time flies when you're having fun.
you think you can
I
get
love
through
it.
this
Hey,
six-page?
I'll read fast.
Okay.
This was actually written by Leonard Wood himself, Major General Leonard Wood, called Plattsburg and Citizenship. The Plattsburg Idea is national service. It's founded upon appreciation of individual obligation for service to the nation in war, as well as in peace, upon a realization of the necessity of building up a better spirit of national solidarity. We hear frequently in these days the expressions America for all the world, America the melting pot, of America's to continue to be open to all the world and at the same time to be a melting pot. Something more effective must be done than has been done in the past. The newcomers to America must drop the antipathies and racial prejudices growing out of the struggles and traditions of the past, and accept and live up to the American ideals. And we must find some way of bringing them into close and immediate touch with our people, and impressing on them the appreciation of the obligations of new citizenship. All the world is indeed coming, and America is not the melting pot to anything like the extent she must be if we're to build up a homogeneous people. All the world is coming today, and may come in greater numbers tomorrow. The question we should ask ourselves is, do they find conditions here which tend to make them good Americans, and to realize that they're people of a new nation? Wow, this is ringing so true for 2008, it's unbelievable. Our immigrants often come in racial groups and too frequently dwell in racial areas. And what is most unfortunate of all, are fed too long by a dialect press, a press which gives them too much of that which tends to keep alive racial feelings and antipathies, and too little of the spirit of the great republic in which they're about to claim citizenship, and the ideals and policies of which they must accept if they're to form a source of real strength to the nation. All who look beneath the surface know that under present conditions America is not assimilating the new elements to anything like the extent we should like to have her. Nor is she a melting pot in the sense that she must be if the republic is to meet, as a people homogeneous in sentiment, the strain of our next great struggle. Our newcomers too often look upon America as a land where obligation for national service doesn't exist. They mistake license for liberty, and, copying the views of many of our own people, assume that they have the right to volunteer, to let others do the service, and war duty for them. With the idea of obligation, when it's suggested, it's resented as placing a limitation on their new freedom, a restriction on their newfound liberty to do what they wish and nothing else. This sentiment, unfortunately, is shared by many of our native-born people who, while demanding equality of privilege and opportunity, deny that there's any equality or obligation. Here's where the great work must begin. We must educate not only the newcomer, but many of our native-born people, and build up among them a proper appreciation of the principle that the privileges and the obligations of citizenship in a democracy are inseparable. We must make clear to them that having given them without stint all the privileges of citizenship, withholding nothing of opportunity, they must accept their full share of citizenship responsibility, in stormy as in fair weather, in war as in peace. If we had withheld anything either of opportunity or privilege, they could, with a show of reason, refuse to accept their full share of responsibility for service in time of peril. But we've given freely, and they must on their part assume the obligation of men of a democracy. There can be no secure national life, no real national solidarity, where men demand and receive a full share of privilege and elect a volunteer and let their fellows bear the obligations of service in times of danger. As a people, we've drifted far afield under the emasculating teaching and words of many present-day leaders. At heart, the spirit of our people is sound, but it's sleeping. We must arouse it to throw off the false teaching, which has claimed that progress in life can be independent of a struggle and sacrifice. Not only must we arouse our own people, but we must bring these newcomers in touch with the real, though slumbering spirit of America, the spirit which loves peace, but not to the extent of gaining it through failure to support the right or to meet the demands of duty, cost what it may. We do very little to bring these newcomers into contact with those who have been here for a long time, with the native-born, with those who have their blood, the tradition of generations of citizenship and struggle. Something is accomplished through the public school system, but it lacks concreteness. Instruction is rather diffuse. There is a sad lack of intelligent, honest teaching of our national history. There's too often little or nothing said about the individual responsibility of each and every citizen of a democracy. There's too little said of responsibility for national service. There's a great deal more than necessary said about the results in the way of employment and salary that'll follow the acquirement of a certain amount of education. The Plattsburgh movement is the first movement of the kind, at least the first one of any importance that's been undertaken in this country, the main purpose of which is the building up of the idea of national service. Service not only in peace, but in war. Service to the limit of our mental and physical capacity. And when I say our, I mean both men and women, the youth of both sexes, as well as all those of more mature years who are physically and mentally fit. This is the real spirit which animates the Plattsburgh movement. Plattsburgh's simply a term, a generic term which applies to all camps where the Plattsburgh spirit and the Plattsburgh method of training prevail. The military training aims to prepare the men to discharge the citizenship duty better in war, to impress on the man the fact that he is one of the responsible units of the nation. The Plattsburgh camps were established in 1913. The second series of camps were drawing to a close in August 1914 when the present Great War began. The establishment of these training camps was in no way connected with the war, although their growth has been stimulated by it, as the war has enabled many of our people to visualize the possibilities of the future and has brought home to them a realizing sense of the need of a peace insurance in the form of national preparedness. You know, you shouldn't really put the key in our backs and wind us up when it comes to this kind of North Country history, because we're rabid fans. Calvin has proved that today by showing this great collection, which is an ongoing collection. I'm sure if some of those bids come through, this table will be stacked higher and higher with things, right, Cal?
Well, I've just about exhausted what I'm going to get on this.
Oh, you have, you think?
One book I'd recommend would be The Citizen Soldiers, written by John Gary Clifford, and it's a good read, and it gives you a good history of this whole idea. We're just about out of a film right here.
I want to thank you, Calvin, for all the time you spent on this, and for all the time you will spend putting those pictures behind what we've done here
today. Work
today.
has just begun, yes.
Yeah, but it's been an awful lot of fun. It's a great study, and I urge our viewers to study on their own and add to their knowledge of the great history of the North Country and the Plattsburgh idea.
And now we're going to listen to the Plattsburgh Marching Song.
All right.
And that's going to close our show. That'll be our new theme, I think.
I love it.
You're supposed to say what's...
And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.
All right. We can't quit without those words.
Oh, no. We're at the Plattsburgh Public Library on Oak Street, and it's a good place to be on a cool winter day. Nice and warm and cozy inside.
It's cold out today.
It is. And Stan Ransom, guess what? He's back. How does it feel to be back in the saddle
like coming
again?
home. Like coming home,
Isn't
Gordy.
it amazing?
All the books and the people. It's just wonderful.
How long have you been back here as director?
Since November 5th, I started.
Isn't that wonderful?
Enjoying every minute of it.
We know we think we think you're a pretty special guy. And we've talked a great deal about this Plattsburgh idea. And Calvin found a copy of the song, the original recording from 1917, which we're going to put at the end of this program. But even before that, we're going to put a very special version of it from this album called Songs of Lake Champlain. When did you discover this song?
I discovered it in the Plattsburgher, and I was looking for songs of Lake Champlain and back in the middle 1990s, trying to find some unusual ones. And I thought, well, there must have been something in the camp that was there in 1916, 17, 18.
I could have told you that.
Yeah, well, I didn't think to ask you, Gordy.
Isn't that amazing?
And I found this song, Last Long Mile, and I liked the lyrics. They were funny. And so I learned the song. And then I went over, when I was doing this CD, I did it with Chuck Eller over in Vermont, in his recording studio. And his engineer, Lane Gibson, said, what it needs is, not a guitar. We need a good marching tempo. He said, and I happen to play the keyboard, and I'd be happy to play
Isn't
it for
that
you
amazing?
while you sing it. So Lane Gibson pounded away on his piano, and then I sang along with it. And I thought it was a
it's a
good one.
jaunty little tune, isn't
Oh,
it?
yes,
And
yes.
it is a marching song.
Yes, and all about the 5-inch crust of Clinton County dust.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, that really captured my imagination.
So did you
Yes.
memorize it?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact.
That's amazing.
Oh, it's not the pack that you carry on your back, or the Springfield on your shoulder,
I love it.
or the 5-inch crust of Clinton County dust that makes you feel your limbs are growing older. And it's not the hike on the hard turnpike that wipes away your smile, nor the socks of sisters that raise the bloomin' blisters. It's the last long
It's
mile.
great. And I told Stanley that when we got the recording, when Calvin got it in the mail, he said, "It looks awful flat. I don't think it'll play." And I had just got a new turntable, and of course it plays beautifully with the original scratches. And I told Stanley that on the flip side is what was known then as the stuttering song,
Oh, yes.
Katie.
My parents
You're the
used to
only
sing that. Yeah.
girl that I adore. Stanley.
When the moon shines. Yes, I remember
over
that
the
one.
cacao shed. Yeah, I know. Anyway, it's wonderful to talk to you, Stanley. As always, thank you for the contribution you've made on so many different fronts here in the North Country. That Connecticut Peddler is alive and well. You're going to put out a new album soon?
Yes, I'm working on songs of the American Revolution in the North Country.
Oh, I love it.
And a lot of interesting things there, too. Plus, I've been working on an article which you're familiar with, this song, The Wreck of the Julie Plant.
Oh, I come
which
across that on my computer all the time.
Well, I've traced it. I've got 5 or 6 different versions. I've traced it back to the Great Lakes and things like that.
It's a great
So,
song.
got a
that's
big
wonderful.
pile of books on it.
Can't wait.
It'll
Let
be
us-
out someday.
Let us know when you're ready.
Okay.
Let's listen now to the official recorded version of The Last Long Mile, the Plattsburgh marching song by Stan Ransom, the Connecticut Peddler, and then the original recording from 1917.
Wow.
Oh, they put me in the army and they handed me a pack. They took away my nice new clothes and dolled me up in cack. They marched me 20 miles a day to fit me for the war. I didn't mind the first 19, but the last one made me sore. Oh, it's not the pack that you carry on your back, nor the Springfield on your shoulder, nor the 5-inch crust of Clinton County dust that makes you feel your limbs are growing older. And it's not the hike on the hard turnpike that wipes away your smile, nor the socks of sisters that raise the bloomin' blisters. It's the last long mile. Someday they'll send us over and they'll put us in a trench, taking pot shots at the Fritzes with the Tommies and the French. And someday we'll be marching through a town across the Rhine, and then you'll bet we'll all forget these mournful words of mine. Oh, it's not the pack that you carry on your back, nor the Springfield on your shoulder, nor the 5-inch crust of Clinton County dust that makes you feel your limbs are growing older. And it's not the hike on the hard turnpike that wipes away your smile, nor the socks of sisters that raise the bloomin' blisters. It's the last long mile. No, it's not the pack that you carry on your back, nor the Springfield on your shoulder, nor the 5-inch crust of Clinton County dust that makes you feel your limbs are growing older. And it's not the hike on the hard turnpike that wipes away your smile, nor the socks of sisters that raise the bloom in blisters. It's the last long